All right, buckle up, everybody.
Yeah.
We're about to take a deep dive that might just make you question everything you thought you knew about reality.
Oh, yeah, this one is a doozy.
Today, we are diving headfirst into the simulation hypothesis.
And to guide us on this mind-bending journey, we have Rizwan Virk's book, The Simulation Hypothesis.
Now, Virk is no stranger to the worlds of technology and science fiction,
That's right, he is an MIT computer scientist.
which makes his perspective on this topic, well, even more fascinating.
Definitely adds a layer of credibility.
Absolutely. The basic premise is, what if our reality is not what we think it is?
What if it's all just a super advanced, hyper-realistic video game?
I gotta say, reading this book, my mind was blown wide open. Virk seamlessly blends cutting-edge science with ancient philosophical concepts.
And he throws in some great pop culture references, too.
Oh yeah, he even ties in stuff from The Matrix, Star Trek, all that good stuff.
It's a wild ride, for sure.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So, where do we even begin with something this big?
Well, Virk lays out a pretty compelling roadmap in his book. He argues that the evolution of video games provides some pretty interesting clues about the future of technology and maybe, just maybe, the nature of our reality.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, how does something like Pac-Man or World of Warcraft point towards the idea that we might be living in a simulation?
Well, Virk takes us back to the very beginning. Remember those early text adventures? Games like Colossal Cave Adventure?
Oh yeah, you're talking about those games where you had to type commands to navigate a virtual world.
Exactly. And those games really sparked the idea of exploring vast virtual spaces. Then came the revolution of graphical games like Pong.
Ah, yes, Pong, where those little pixels bounce back and forth across the screen. It was revolutionary for its time.
Simple, but groundbreaking. Suddenly we had visuals, pixels, basic physics coming into play. It laid the foundation for the realistic graphics and complex game mechanics we see today.
It's amazing to think how far we've come since then.
And don't forget about graphical RPGs like King's Quest and Zelda.
Oh, those were game changers for sure. I spent countless hours exploring those worlds.
Me too. And these games were crucial because they expanded on that concept of a game world. They gave us persistent environments, non-player characters, NPCs. They started to feel more like real places.
It's like those games were planting the seeds for the idea of simulated realities, even if we didn't realize it at the time.
And then came the era of massive multiplayer online games, MMORPGs like World of Warcraft and Second Life.
Oh yeah, those worlds were mind-blowing. Thousands of players interacting in these persistent online environments.
Those games really blurred the lines between virtual and real. They introduced concepts like in-game economies, user-generated content, mirroring aspects of our physical world.
And they created these incredibly dedicated communities, people forming real relationships and friendships within those virtual spaces.
And then there was No Man's Sky, remember that one?
Oh, how could I forget? They tried to simulate an entire universe with 18 quintillion planets.
And each one with its own unique ecosystem, all procedurally generated.
That's right, using algorithms to create data automatically. That's got to be a massive clue when we think about the simulation hypothesis, right?
Absolutely. If our reality is simulated, procedural generation could be how it's all created and managed.
So we see this clear trajectory. Video games becoming increasingly complex, realistic, and immersive. And Virk's point is that our technology as a whole is heading in the same direction.
Exactly. The line between the virtual and the real is getting blurrier by the day.
And this is where things start to get really interesting, right? When we talk about virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR.
Now you're talking. This is where the rubber meets the road. Today's VR is making the idea of a simulated reality feel, well, eerily tangible.
I've tried some of those VR experiences, and I gotta say, it's pretty mind-blowing. You really feel like you're transported to another world.
It's incredible, right? I had a similar experience playing VR table tennis. The physics felt so real. I was completely immersed in the virtual environment. I actually forgot for a moment that I was wearing a headset, standing in my living room.
It's like stepping through the screen, becoming part of the digital world.
And think about the advancements we've seen in CGI and motion capture in films like Jurassic Park and Avatar.
Oh man, those dinosaurs in Jurassic Park looked so real. And the Na'vi in Avatar with their expressive faces and movements, it's becoming harder and harder to distinguish between real actors and virtual characters.
Exactly. And 3D printing is another example. It's basically taking digital models and rendering them as physical objects in the real world.
It's like a real-world version of rendering, taking something from the digital realm and bringing it into the physical.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to print anything, even at the molecular level. Imagine the possibilities.
Okay, so we've got Increasingly realistic video games, immersive technologies like VR and AR. It's all starting to point towards this idea of a simulated reality. But how do we jump from there to the idea that we might already be in a simulation?
Well, that's where Virk takes us beyond the realm of just gaming and technology. He brings in some of the biggest mysteries in science, specifically quantum physics.
Quantum physics. Hold on. How does that fit into all of this?
It's all about the weirdness of the quantum world. Take quantum indeterminacy, for example. This is the idea that subatomic particles don't seem to have fixed properties until they're observed.
It's like they exist in a state of probability until someone decides to look at them.
Exactly. It's like they're waiting for us to measure them before they decide what they want to be. And Virk suggests that this could be a clue that we're living in a simulation.
Whoa, okay, I'm listening. How so?
He draws a parallel to conditional rendering in video games. It's an optimization technique where only the parts of the virtual world that the player can see are fully rendered in detail.
Ah, so you're saying that our reality might not be fully rendered until it's observed, just like in a video game.
Yeah,
Only the parts we're looking at are actually real.
it's a mind-bending concept, but it could explain why quantum particles behave so strangely. It's like the universe is saving processing power by not rendering everything in full detail all the time.
So if we are living in a simulation, quantum physics might actually be giving us a glimpse behind the curtain, a clue to how the simulation works.
That's what Virk is arguing, and it gets even weirder when we start talking about the nature of time in a simulation.
All right, I'm ready for more weirdness. Hit me with it.
Have you ever heard of Wheeler's delayed choice experiment?
It rings a bell, but I definitely need a refresher.
Basically, it suggests that choices we make in the present can actually influence events that happened in the past. It's like time travel in reverse, totally counterintuitive, but it makes a strange kind of sense if we're talking about a simulated reality.
So in a simulated world, the past isn't necessarily set in stone. It can be changed by actions we take in the present.
It's a possibility. And it leads us to another mind-boggling concept, the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, also known as MWI.
Many worlds. Okay, this is where I start to feel like I'm falling down the rabbit hole.
I know, right? But stay with me here. MWI suggests that every time a quantum measurement is made, the universe splits, creating multiple parallel universes. Each universe represents a different outcome of that measurement.
So every time we make a decision, every time something could go one way or another, a new universe is born.
It's a wild idea, but some physicists believe it's the best way to explain the strangeness of quantum mechanics. And it's not that different from the way video games work. Every time you make a choice in a game, you're essentially choosing one path out of many possibilities.
It's like a cosmic choose-your-own-adventure book, with infinite possibilities branching out in every direction.
And it raises some fascinating questions about the nature of our reality. If MWI is true, are we just experiencing one tiny sliver of an infinite multiverse?
And is each of those universes a separate simulation?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we all part of one giant interconnected simulation with infinite branches?
Those are questions that even Rizwan Virk doesn't have definitive answers to. But he does delve even deeper into the structure of a simulated universe.
Okay, I'm holding on tight. Take me deeper.
He explores the possibility that space and time might be quantized, meaning they exist in discrete units. It's like saying that reality itself has a fundamental resolution, just like a computer screen.
Wait, are you saying that space itself might be pixelated? Like our entire reality is just a giant 3D grid?
It's a mind-blowing concept.
Uh,
And he points to the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of distance according to physics, as evidence for this quantization.
So there's a limit to how small things can get, a fundamental pixel size for reality.
It's a possibility. And he even argues that the speed of light, which we think of as the ultimate speed limit of the universe, might just be a limitation of the simulation's physics engine.
So even the speed of light, a fundamental constant in physics, might be a rule set by the programmers of the simulation.
It's definitely making us rethink everything we thought we knew about the universe.
My mind is officially blown. And we're just getting started.
And you know what? We haven't even touched on the spiritual implications of the simulation hypothesis yet.
Whoa, there's a spiritual side to all of this. Now I'm really intrigued.
Oh, yeah. It turns out some ancient wisdom aligns surprisingly well with these modern technological concepts.
Okay, now I have to hear more about this. This is getting good.
We'll definitely dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
You've got me hooked. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to explore the spiritual side of the simulation hypothesis. Okay, so we've established that the idea of us living in a simulation isn't as crazy as it might sound at first. But if we are in a simulation, who's running the show? Who are the masterminds behind this grand cosmic video game?
Right, that's the big question. Virk explores some pretty wild possibilities in his book.
And I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah.
So let's start with maybe the most human-centric idea. Could it be our descendants from the future running the simulation?
Oh, the future human theory. It's a classic. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, imagine a civilization so advanced that they have the technology to create hyper-realistic simulations of their past.
Like they're looking back at their ancestors, kind of like we look back at historical records and archaeological digs.
Exactly. Except they can experience the past in a fully immersive way, reliving it in all its messy glory.
And maybe they're doing it for research, trying to understand their history, or maybe even learn from our mistakes.
It would explain a lot about why we, the simulated beings, are so similar to them. I mean, they're essentially recreating themselves, right?
It's like the ultimate ancestry project.
Mm-hmm.
Except instead of tracing your family tree, you're recreating your entire ancestral world.
Exactly. But, it doesn't have to be just humans running the show.
Oh, right, we can't forget about those little green men. What about the possibility of aliens being the puppet masters behind this simulation?
The alien hypothesis. Another classic. And it's a fun one to think about.
I mean, it plays into all those sci-fi tropes we love, right? Aliens abducting humans for experiments, probing our minds,
Maybe we're like those lab rats running through a maze, except the maze is our entire reality.
and they're observing us, studying our behavior, learning about human nature.
Or maybe, just maybe, they're not just observing from afar.
Oh, you're going with the "they walk among us" theory.
What if some of the people we interact with every day aren't actually human? What if they're aliens in disguise, subtly manipulating against or gathering information?
Man, that's a mind-blowing thought. It's like something straight out of a science fiction movie. It would make for some pretty interesting dinner party conversations, wouldn't it?
It definitely adds a layer of paranoia to everyday life, doesn't it? Makes you wonder who you can trust.
Okay, so we've got future humans, we've got aliens. Who else is in the running for the title of Cosmic Simulator?
Well, there's one more possibility that's both fascinating and, to be honest, a little bit creepy.
Oh, I have a feeling I know where you're going with this. Let's hear it.
What if our simulators aren't biological beings at all? What if they're super intelligent machines, AI that's evolved beyond our control?
The AI overlord scenario. Okay, I got to admit, that one's a bit unsettling,
Yeah.
but it also feels kind of inevitable given how fast AI is developing.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, if we're on a trajectory towards creating machines that are smarter than us, isn't it possible that they've already done the same thing to their creators, and now we're living in their simulation?
It's a classic sci-fi trope, but it feels more and more like it could become reality.
And it raises some big questions about the nature of consciousness. I mean, if we're living in a simulation created by AI, does that mean our consciousness is also artificial? Are we just lines of code in a giant program?
It's enough to give you an existential crisis. But let's say, for argument's sake, that one of these entities, whether it's future humans, aliens, or AI, is running this simulation. What's their motivation? Why go through all the trouble to create this incredibly detailed and complex reality?
Right, the big why question. It's a tough one, and Virk offers some interesting possibilities in his book. Maybe we're entertainment, like a giant cosmic reality show for their amusement.
So they're watching our lives unfold, laughing at our dramas, cheering for our triumphs.
It's possible. Or maybe they're studying us, trying to learn about human behavior, the nature of consciousness, or even the mysteries of the universe itself.
We're like those ants in an ant farm going about our lives while they observe our every move.
Or maybe it's more experimental, like they're running different simulations with different parameters, seeing how things play out under various conditions.
Testing different scenarios, different historical paths, different societal structures.
Exactly. Trying to find answers to questions we can't even fathom.
So we're like guinea pigs in a giant cosmic experiment.
It's humbling, isn't it? But it also makes you think about free will. If our reality is a simulation created for a specific purpose, do we really have control over our choices?
Or are we just following a script, playing out a predetermined role in their grand experiment?
It's a tough question to grapple with, but even if we are living in a simulation with certain constraints, Virk argues that we still have agency. We still have the power to make choices within the boundaries of that simulated reality.
So, like, we can't change the fundamental laws of physics or rewrite history, but we can still choose how we react to situations, how we interact with others, how we live our lives.
Exactly. It's like playing a video game. You might not be able to change the rules of the game, but you can still choose your character, your path, your strategy.
And those choices have consequences, both within the game and in our simulated reality. They shape our experiences, influence our relationships, and contribute to the overall story of our lives.
Right. And maybe, just maybe, the purpose of the simulation is to learn and grow, to evolve our consciousness, to expand our understanding of the universe, to become something more than we are now.
It's like we're all on a cosmic quest to level up, both individually and collectively.
And who knows, maybe by understanding the nature of the simulation, we can even find ways to break free from its limitations, to transcend the boundaries of this simulated reality.
Whoa, now that's a mind-blowing thought. But before we start planning our escape from the Matrix, maybe we should focus on finding those glitches, those clues that might reveal the true nature of our reality.
Oh yeah, the glitch hunt. Virk talks about that too.
So where do we start looking for these glitches? What are the signs that we might be living in a simulation?
Well, we've already talked about some of them. The weirdness of quantum physics, the possibility of quantized space and time.
And those strange coincidences, those synchronicities that make you wonder if there's something more going on behind the scenes.
Maybe those are like whispers from the universe, hinting at the underlying code. Or maybe they're intentional clues left by the creators of the simulation, like Easter eggs hidden in a video game.
Cosmic Easter eggs. I love that idea. Imagine stumbling upon some hidden message or anomaly that proves beyond a doubt that we're all just characters in a giant video game.
It would be a paradigm-shifting discovery.
But even if we never find definitive proof, just the act of questioning, exploring these possibilities, it changes your perspective on reality.
It opens your mind to new possibilities, makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It's like taking the red pill in the Matrix. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Exactly, and that's where the real power of the simulation hypothesis lies. It's not about proving or disproving the theory, it's about how it changes the way we think, the way we live our lives.
I'm definitely feeling that shift in perspective already, but I'm still grappling with the so what question. Okay, let's say we are living in a simulation. How does that change things on a practical level? How should we live our lives knowing this might be true?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive into the simulation hypothesis.
Okay, I can't wait to hear what Virk has to say about that. So we've explored who might be running this simulation and why they might have created it. But now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. If we are living in a simulation, how does that change how we see ourselves in the universe? How should we live our lives knowing that all of this might be, well, a program?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to get lost in the what-ifs and all the mind-blowing possibilities, but ultimately I think the simulation hypothesis should be a starting point for looking inward, for personal growth.
I like that. So how does Virk suggest we navigate this whole new way of looking at reality?
Well, he starts by tackling one of the biggest implications head-on: free will. If our reality is just code, a program running on some supercomputer, do we really have control over our choices? Or are we just like puppets on strings following a predetermined script?
It's a question that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, and the simulation hypothesis just adds another layer of complexity, right?
Oh, absolutely. It makes you wonder, are we really making choices or are we just playing out a predetermined role? But Virk, he makes a point of saying that even though our choices might be limited by the rules of the simulation, we still have agency within those limits.
So it's kind of like playing a video game, right? You can't rewrite the code of the game, but you can still choose how you play it.
Exactly. You choose your character, you make decisions within the game, and those decisions have consequences. And it's the same in our simulated reality, according to Virk. Our actions matter, they shape our experiences, and they contribute to the overall story, even if that story is playing out within a simulation.
Okay, that actually makes me feel a little less like a puppet.
Yeah.
It means we're not just passive observers, right? We still have a role to play.
Absolutely. And that leads to another big question: purpose. Why are we here? What's the point of all this if it's all a simulation? Virk explores a few possibilities. He suggests that maybe the whole point of the simulation is for us to learn and grow, to evolve our consciousness.
So like we're in a giant cosmic school trying to level up, become better versions of ourselves.
That's a compelling thought, isn't it? And he even connects this idea to the concept of karma. Our actions have consequences. They ripple through the simulation, affecting not just us, but everyone and everything around us.
So it's like a giant feedback loop. our choices influence the evolution of the simulation itself.
That's the idea. We're all interconnected, playing a role in this grand cosmic experiment. But of course, if this is all a simulation, then everything we experience, everything we value, is it all just, well, an illusion?
That's what keeps tripping me up. Does the simulation hypothesis devalue our relationships, our achievements, our experiences? If it's all just code, does it even matter?
I get that. It's a tough one to wrap your head around. But Virk argues that even if the world is a simulation, the emotions we feel, the connections we make, the experiences we have, they're all still real to us. They matter to us.
So it's like the characters in a video game aren't real in the traditional sense, but their stories, their relationships, they still have meaning within the context of the game world.
Right. And the simulation hypothesis doesn't change that. It just changes our understanding of the stage on which all those experiences are playing out.
Okay, that's a helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
So let's say we accept the possibility that we're living in a simulation. How should that change how we approach life? What practical advice does Virk offer?
Well, first and foremost, he encourages us to embrace the mystery, the wonder of it all, to see the simulation hypothesis as a tool for personal growth, for expanding our consciousness, for breaking free from limiting beliefs.
So instead of being freaked out by the idea that we might be living in a simulated reality, we should see it as an opportunity to think bigger, to question everything.
Exactly. It's like taking the red pill in the Matrix, you know? Once you see the world through this new lens, you can't go back. And he also encourages us to pay attention to those little glitches in our reality, those weird coincidences, those moments of synchronicity.
Like maybe those are little hints, messages from the universe, or maybe even from the creators of the simulation.
Maybe. Or maybe they're just reminders that reality is far stranger and more flexible than we typically think it is.
I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to those little glitches from now on. So embrace the mystery, look for the glitches. Anything else?
Yeah, actually, Virk's final piece of advice is perhaps the simplest, but it's also the most profound. Be kind.
Be kind. That seems, well, pretty basic.
I know, right? But he argues that in a simulated reality where our actions have far-reaching consequences, kindness becomes even more important.
Because we're all connected, and our actions ripple outward, affecting not just ourselves, but everyone else in the simulation.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in a digital world, even if this is all just a program, human connection, compassion, empathy, those things still matter.
Wow, this whole conversation has really been mind-blowing. I feel like I need some time to process all of this.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in.
But I definitely have a new perspective on reality, on my place in the universe, on the meaning of life even.
That's the power of the simulation hypothesis. It forces you to ask big questions, to challenge your assumptions, to look at the world in a whole new way.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll find that definitive proof, that undeniable glitch that confirms we're all living in a giant cosmic video game.
Maybe. But until then, we can embrace the mystery, we can live our lives to the fullest, and we can remember to be kind to each other. After all, we might all be in the simulation together.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the simulation hypothesis. It's been an incredible journey.
The pleasure was all mine. Keep those minds open, folks, and until next time, keep questioning everything.
And that's a wrap.